something is not only personal data because of its content. It is a legal definition, and the question whether it stores personal data is just not here or there. It is not relevant. If it's regular persons, not public persons, I think there you need to apply anonymization techniques. So I think we should have really good data subject rights at the output level. Can I then already now be subject to fines of GDPR because that open model violates GDPR? And I think that is taking it a step too far.
Hello everyone, I am Sergio Maldonado and this is Masters of Privacy, a set of interviews covering the intersection of marketing, data, privacy and technology with a clear goal in mind, which is redefining the relationship between people, brands and media around transparency and control. Which is to say, we're aiming for real customer centricity, or if you will, human centricity. We regularly talk to DPOs, CMOs, CDOs and whoever else we find interesting and able to share valuable insights. So we hope you like it. Please do reach out if you have any ideas on future topics or speakers. Okay, so we saw the EDPB released an opinion on AI models and personal data last Wednesday, but this had been preceded by various important milestones. The Irish DPC had asked, in fact, the EDPB for help when it started questioning Google's PALM model. And the Hamburg DPA had released a discussion paper that provoked an avalanche, we'll say, of opinions. One such opinion, and with particular weight and cross-border impact, was Lokke Moerel's, together with Margin Storm. The EDPB opinion seems in fact to be rather aligned with our guests' analysis rather than the approach proposed by the Hamburg DPA, by the discussion paper. While new and more complete analysis of the recent opinion, again the EDPB opinion, come to light, this conversation should give us a good enough context of the challenges ahead. As for Lokke Moerel, she is Morrison Foerster's lead counsel on binding corporate rules, or BCRs, and has vast experience advising multinational companies in obtaining their BCR approvals throughout the EU, having authored the leading textbook on BCRs published by Oxford University. She is also an authority on artificial intelligence, big data, and the Internet of Things, again, when it comes to compliance. Let's go for it. Lokke, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure to be here.
To recap, the Hamburg Data Protection Authority, citing the Danish DPA, they had said that a model in itself does not contain personal data, the LLM in itself. And there were many arguments, I'm not going to repeat them all. The basic idea that tokens, mathematical representations, embeddings do not represent personal data in itself, and that we had everything wrong because we were thinking in terms of databases. And the GDPR was built around that idea of structured data, and that we should totally abandon that kind of mindset to understand that if we are seeing personal data, that's something that happens in the system, not in the model. So what's your primary answer to that statement?
Well, they are dead right that the data in the LLM is, mathematical tokens. That is true. And, an LLM is not a database. Nobody argues it is a database. So I don't know where that is coming from. It is for sure not a database. So, but the point is that GDPR personal data is a legal concept. It is not just something is not only personal data because of its content, but also if information, and in all the guidance, it actually refers to source code or whatever, can be personal data if that information relates to individuals due to its purposes or the impact. And so you have information in an LLM, there are tokens there, that is information, it's digital. And, if you apply the tool, it ultimately results in output that can relate to individuals for its purposes. So it is a legal definition. And the question whether it stores personal data is just not, it's not here or there. It is not relevant.
Good. That gives us a nice framework, because what we're saying is that it's not about the technical definition, about the content, as you're saying. So then we're looking at the ultimate value. What are we trying to protect? And is it possible that we have been quite obsessed with the element of collection and the origin of the data, and how we should stay in control at the very outset when data is when data shows up for the first time, and that if we lose control of that, then further down the chain it's very hard to exercise our rights? When now that things are a bit out of control, and that we see that we are affected by algorithms that are trained by data about others, not even us, and that data about other people make us more predictable, not just because it is, relatives sharing their DNA, but also because they're humans and we share certain traits. So is it possible that it's Article 22 and the idea of all of us being protected in the future against the potential risks that really matters, rather than everything that happens in between?
Yeah, if you take that view, you would say, look, don't have an LLM because it could predict, I don't know, outputs based on data of others for individuals. I'm not that of that opinion. I think the European Court in the search engine cases already had an issue there where, search engines find data that is already out there. The publishers of that data on the websites, the controller, should have a legal basis to do so. And the court said, okay, you can collect it and make it available with links also if it's sensitive special categories of data. But if somebody complains about it later on, then you need to have a look whether you do have a legal basis, but ex post, not ex ante. And then the court said yes, and you could have a legal basis because the European Treaty on Human Rights says that the freedom of information. So for public people, there can be public persons, you can actually have a legal basis. So I think focusing on the input, on the data collected, etc., and try to give DSARs at that level is not really remedying is not providing actual protection. Why? Because you can take certain data out. It doesn't mean anything about what the output is. So I think we should have really good data subject rights at the output level. And, if it's regular persons, not public persons, I think there you need to apply anonymization techniques to try to contextually anonymize that. I think for public persons, that is not necessary. Anyway, so that is the protection at the input level or at the training data level. And I think people go overboard, like the CNIL and some of the others that say you need to have DSART rights at the level of, all the data the training data level. It doesn't add anything because first, it takes a lot of time to look for it. It is anonymized, pseudonymized. How are you going to find it? You need to collect extra data to do that. I mean, LLMs are really a game changer, and I think we need to apply GDPR in the spirit as the European Court actually does. So, yeah, so there you are.
So, touching on all of these elements, so people say that the risk stems, or that it can be proven, by the fact that you can prompt a model, which in the end you're prompting through a system, right, through an interface, and that you can ask that model about some individual, and that it will return some data. That is the basis of Max Schrems, and you're touching on famous people, right, on unique individuals that would be outliers in a training data set or whatever. But the fact that if I am querying the LLM for my name and anything is returned, The argument that I see is a big, important argument, is that if you keep famous people aside, any training data set that contains anything that is associated to me, it is likely to come up with that sequence of words, my name and last name, because statistically, it is likely that this sort of autocomplete to oversimplify leads to it putting together this name. So that if I believe it was Dick Neal, I don't know anymore, that said that if a training data set is too small, in fact it is riskier because the same person would be showing up more often.
You're right. And I see that the big providers really deduplicate, their data sets. So for that reason, to make sure there are not too many similar names in there. So for even for public persons, they deduplicate, because otherwise it starts memorizing more than predicting. So that is one. I see they take a lot of measures to make sure that even if you ask for a prompt like give me the CV of Sergio Maldonado, then that it is blocked if you do not qualify under their criteria as a public person. So if it would happen and it would be wrong, you can complain and they will block it. At the moment, the state of the art is that they can put in safeguards like suppressing prompts, not answering certain prompts. They can block outputs, but they cannot yet make specific changes in the LLMs itself. Google has issued a call for research and assistance on that, but it is just not the state of the art yet. But the reality is that it is only the providers of the LLM that can put in that type of safeguards. If they have a closed source model, it's, as a user, you cannot do that. So they all allow complaints, and rightfully so. And maybe ultimately it will be possible that you can actually make a change in the LLM model, but that we will have to await that innovation.
I asked one of the lawyers at Google whether it was possible to introduce any changes, exercise any rights, as for now is being questioned, right, in these cases, or the Iris DPC with Palm.
Yeah.
And he said it was impossible. So everything that you've mentioned now, I see it happening through filters and through the interface and through the systems, right? Through ChatGPT instead of GPT-4o.
Yeah.
So that sort of reinforces, in a way, what the Hamburg DPA was saying, that it is the system that allows us to introduce filters, and it is to the system and prompting that we are getting back to the individuals, and that memorization could, in fact, they didn't say this. This is now my own sort of conclusion, that memorization maybe is not happening in the model itself, even though, there's plenty of argument around that. But instead, it is happening in the way in which we use it, and all the measures are being applied through this process.
Yeah, but Sergio, I get that, but I read the Hamburg paper a bit different, and maybe it was an early paper, so if they now think about it again, but they said you have an LLM, and then you have an LLM supported AI system.
Yes.
So then, you have the LLM of OpenAI or whatever, and I am a company or a government organization getting a license to the LLM and building an LLM support or use the LLM to support my AI system. But if that is the case, it is still the LLM provider that can provide the safeguards. It's not I, as a company, that can do it. And that's why it is bizarre to split it up like this, because ultimately, the European Court looks at ecosystems. Do you remember the Shufa case?
Yes.
Where it was about a risk scoring, the risk scoring issuer, and then the banks using the risk score. And it was about automated decision making. And the court said, the risk scoring company is actually doing the ADM because they are the one that can actually implement the changes. And the banks are using it, but they are looking at it. And if you wouldn't rule like that, there would be a gap in protection. And that is here, I think, as well. So I'm sure ultimately, and let's face it, ChatGPT is the interface. So it is an LLM supported AI system. Basically, it's in interface. It's in the same hands. So there you don't have that gap in protection because they can do it.
Yeah.
But once you have another third party, you would have a serious gap in protection. And that's why I think you can't split it off like that as the Hamburg authority did. I think it will not hold.
Then you've got all of these instances of a model where people are not yet building anything on top. Every time someone has a model, do they become a controller?
Well, if they use that model to build stuff or further train it, and I think the distinction ultimately would be what did you do and what was the original model? If it is clear the original model, which can still be tested because it's open source, was totally biased, didn't have the required safeguards, blah, blah, blah. I'm going overboard, but you get my point. Then I think ultimately, based on purposes and use of foreseeable use of your LLM, that the authorities and the court will say, look, you can't put something on the market that is totally violating GDPR and then saying it wasn't me. I mean, of course, the responsibilities apply at that level if they need to be addressed at that level. So I understand it's all new, but if you look at it holistically, I personally have no doubt.
I think you're right that we need protection and that we cannot just simply let, for example, a Clearview AI get away with having trained on all of his faces just because the model now is closed and so now the baton is passed to whoever is going to build on top of that model.
Look, Sergio, I have to make one caveat. Look, companies ask me, if I now use, I don't know, an open source model, and can I then already now be subject to fines of GDPR because that open model violates GDPR? And I think that is taking it a step too far. I think Clearview, the users of Clearview maybe weren't on the hook for big fines under GDPR. Until that moment, it was clear Clearview was violating GDPR. If you then continue using it, then I think the fairness principle, the accountability principle will kick in. And then if you still use it while Clearview has to stop it and can't license it anymore, then I think you're on the hook. But till that and that is standard law in all countries. The moment you cannot profit from somebody else's violations of the law, that is a tort in and of itself. So I'm surprised people are surprised by it, because that is, if an employee steals something and then you hire them and you use their stolen know-how, you're violating the law as well.
True. So that's how you sort of ended your article, to which we'll link, the same idea of applying the principles. And that's the last thing I'll ask you. What do you think would be the most effective way to apply something like the GDPR or evolve from the GDPR in order for us to be able to encompass all of these new challenges?
Yeah. Well, I think GDPR is technology neutral, and every time I start looking at a new phenomenon like blockchain, etc., you see that technology needs to evolve and be innovated further to implement privacy by design, etc. So at the moment, LLMs are, the first car without brakes. Yeah. But it doesn't mean GDPR is thus it's actually working as it should be, because they are trying to inspire developers of new technologies to implement it based on privacy by design. And that is what the EDPB also said. I'm curious what they're going to say in their new guidance, but it is that they say for now it's fine and we're not prohibiting it, but you need to develop further. That is an perfect example of how GDPR should work. It is if you look at GDPR from an old school perspective and not try to apply it at technology in an open manner, then you start thinking, oh, they're collecting personal data for training purposes. You need to have data subject rights for training data. Well, the usefulness of that is zero protection. I think the CNIL even suggested that we should have an opt-out register, so individuals around the world could actually say, you're not allowed to use this information of me on this website. But to think about it, you just break that down for a second. It means, I'm opting out and then it is not allowed. So if I don't do that, then it is allowed. Well, actually, we should protect them without people having to do something. It's bizarre. The whole, actually, it would be counterproductive if you do it like that. It would undermine data protection. So that is what I call old school thinking. And you need to see that this is swapping around the ecosystem, the LLMs, and the real impact is at the output level. That's where the data subject rights should apply. And at the training stage, you need privacy by design measures, trying to deduplicate, apply anonymization techniques for non-public persons, delete all the, social security numbers also of public persons. I mean, you can do that. You need to do a lot. I'm not saying they don't need to do anything. I think they need and it is a science in and of itself. I'm involved now in the development of the training of a Dutch language LLM here in the Netherlands, and they developed a whole new tool to anonymize data in a contextual manner. Because if you just take out all the names, the LLM is not trained. Is it a person flying or an object? Or do you see? The concept of an object is identified by names and description. Do you see? Anyway,
it's the context. Yes,
it's the context, and it's not a simple redaction or anything. And
yep.
And that is a science. And I feel that at the moment, the data protection authorities do not realize yet how much work that is, and that the innovation is mostly on that. But once you've done it, stop talking about data subject rights, because it doesn't add anything.
Very good. Lokke, thank you very much. Super helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm glad.
Okay, that's all for today. Follow us on Blue Sky, and in the Masters of Privacy Altogether profile, you will find the starter pack, which includes the feeds of all of our past guests. There is also a Masters of Privacy LinkedIn channel, which I invite you to follow, where you will find links to our transcripts, cheat sheets, and other surprises every now and then. Our main website is mastersofprivacy.com. Thank you for listening.